Hi, everyone. Everyone is still kind of rolling in here, so we're going to start in just a few minutes. Just wanted to do a quick audio check, so if someone could use the chat box to let me know that you guys can hear me and also see my screen, that would be great. And then I'm going to put myself on mute, and we'll come back in a few minutes to get started. Thanks, Miles. Thanks, Scott. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we have a lot to cover today, a lot of good stuff that we are really excited to present to you. I'm going to pass the roll over to Sarah and Dan here in just a minute here, just some housekeeping things. My name's Rachel. I'm with Salsa. I'm going to be moderating this webinar here today. Also, we are recording, so everyone who has registered and is attending today will get a copy of the slides and then also a recording of today's webinar. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat box and let those come in. We're going to go through the whole webinar, and then we have some time blocked off for the end to go through questions. So we'll do a little bit of Q&A. But without further ado, I will pass it over to Sarah and Dan from MediaCause.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Sarah Swan. I'm marketing manager here at MediaCause, joined by my colleague Dan, who's our digital fundraising director. So just to give you a little bit of background, so we're part of the team here at MediaCause, and MediaCause is a digital marketing agency that works to accelerate the growth and impact of organizations doing good in the world. So, since 2011, we've worked with over 300 nonprofit organizations, social impact startups, foundations, educators, and philanthropists, really just to create lasting impact. So a little about what we're doing today. So first we want to just kind of set the stage and kind of go over a little bit of what we're seeing in the digital landscape as it relates to fundraising. And then jump into kind of some tips for actually shifting gears after that Giving Tuesday moment. And then dive into ways to make your campaign more manageable, kind of both on the side of your supporters as well as your staff. So tips for actually segmenting your file, and then diving into some more tactical examples of how you can manage your appeals going from Giving Tuesday into year-end fundraising. And as Rachel mentioned, we'll make sure to save some time for Q&A at the end. But as questions come up, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll make sure to address as many as we can at the end of this webinar. So first, we'd really like to, before we dive in, we just want to take a bit of time to talk about the digital fundraising landscape as it relates to your supporters and to your Giving Tuesday campaigns. So the way we fundraise is changing. I think we've all seen this. We're probably seeing a little bit of a shift at our organizations. And these major shifts shouldn't be ignored. These shifts in donor preferences and behaviors should really help inform your overall fundraising strategy. So first off, donors are increasingly digital first, and they're always connected. So they're really expecting to engage with organizations of their choice from the comfort of their own homes and their own phones. They're also relationships driven. So they're expecting to engage on a one-on-one level and really feel a strong connection to an organization's mission. They're also motivated by social proof. So seeing other supporters engaging with an organization, seeing their friends, their family, that is also a huge motivator for the individual to also be involved. And lastly, donors are surrounded by a surplus of opportunities, but have limited attention. So thinking about kind of the crowded landscape that is digital, as an organization, you really need to think about how you stand out and how you can stand out to your supporters. Luckily, we have some tips and tactics for how to do so, and that's kind of what we'll get into with this presentation. Now I'll kick it over to Dan.
Yeah, and so hi everyone. So we want to talk briefly a little bit about Giving Tuesday itself, and just a brief history on Giving Tuesday. So Giving Tuesday actually started in 2012 with the 92nd Street Y and the United Nations Foundation, and it was a response to commercialization and consumerism in that post-Thanksgiving moment. And I recall back when I was working in a nonprofit at the time, kind of not really liking Giving Tuesday because it basically meant that I had to start my year-end planning a lot earlier than I used to. So early on, didn't like it too much, but now I'm grateful for it. And I think it's a good part of the year-end fundraising campaign. The one thing we like it, you want to think about this as a complementary piece of your overall year-end fundraising plan to save time and effort. We want to capitalize on the hype around this big, huge giving day. It's also a big part of bringing on new donors and acquiring new donors. Organizations acquire 3 to 5 times more donors on Giving Tuesday than any other regular day. So for those of us who worry about acquisition, Giving Tuesday is a really prominent day to do that. Another point is social proof. So avoid starting your new year-end campaign at $0 and start it with a sort of large pool of supporters.
Yeah, so we want to talk a little bit before we dive in, just kind of on our approach to fundraising, which is community-centric fundraising. So you might have heard the term, donor-centric, which I think is talked about a lot now. But really the concept around this is kind of putting your community at the center of your communication strategy and then activating purposeful touch points around them. So really it's about putting your supporters first. So rather than being org-centric, it's about transferring ownership of your mission and your impact to your audience. And really what this does is it allows them to feel more invested and personally involved in your mission. It inspires more curiosity. And really, at the end of the day, it's about inspiring people to take action. So kind of framing the donor as the hero to your organization. And then the second piece of that, so putting your supporters at the center, is to then surround them with opportunities. So reaching your supporters where they are. So making sure to kind of communicate with them across multiple touch points, whether that's on email or via social media or through content on your website. But really just activating them through these multiple touch points to build that shared passion, drive engagement, and then ultimately increase response rates for future initiatives, or in this case, for donations specifically. So now we want to dive into kind of that Giving Tuesday moment. So how do you transition between Giving Tuesday to year end in a way that's smooth and makes sense for your supporters, but at the same time is not a heavy lift on your teams? So giving season really presents an opportunity to create an appeal cadence that really makes sense kind of given the time of year. There are many milestones in which you can frame your messaging around, whether it's thanking donors on Thanksgiving, framing that Giving Tuesday appeal and thanking them after Giving Tuesday. And then after that point, kind of transitioning back to appeal-driven content. Giving Tuesday also presents an opportunity to really create momentum around year end and build on the success or the failure of your Giving Tuesday campaign. We use an asterisk when we say failure as it relates to Giving Tuesday because the mission continues no matter what. And there are many ways to communicate that to supporters and inspire them to continue to stay involved throughout year end. So really, this Giving Tuesday moment, you have the opportunity to really maximize on the ROI of your Giving Tuesday campaign by turning any of those first-time donors who came in through Giving Tuesday into dedicated supporters. So a few things we want to touch on as it relates to that. The first being really to focus on retention. So, obviously individual donations are great and they're exciting, but you've brought so many new supporters in that it's really the time to kind of nurture those new donors, and then also, of course, nurture your current donor base. And also, a fun fact is that acquiring new donors is actually 5 times more expensive for an organization. So it's really financially more responsible as well. You also want to be, as it relates to retention, you want to be timely. So that time immediately following a donor's first interaction with your organization is really a very, very crucial step in building strong relationships with those donors and with those supporters. And then you want to make sure to have a plan. So being timely, in order to be timely, you need to have that plan. So make sure to invest some time in creating a follow-up plan for Giving Tuesday, because that can really make the difference between kind of having that brief moment on that one crazy hectic day of having a ton of engagement to actually having lasting support and building a supporter base that will stay with you more long-term. So kind of the first way to do that as we think about retention is to make sure to thank your donors. So as you plan your Giving Tuesday campaign, remember to create assets that really start a great thank you message, engage with supporters in real time, and plan how you'll show donors the campaign's impact. So a good thank you really addresses the donor by name, and it makes sure that it's personalized and also communicates that impact. You also want to make sure to reference the campaign and the collective impact of that campaign, and then make sure to explain as well what that gift is going to be used for. So really it's personalization and timeliness, which are of the utmost importance. So you want to make sure that you really have the tools in place to achieve this. So tools such as Salsa Engage, which have those timed triggers based on behavior, and then also those automated emails that can really make the difference between a thank you that stands out to a donor and a thank you that might fall flat. So in that vein, once you thank those new donors, you want to make sure to welcome them into your community. So again, this post-donation moment is really a crucial opportunity to interact with those new donors when they're most engaged with your organization. They've already raised their hand, they've already said yes. So now it's the time to really educate them on who you are and what your mission is and why your work is important. So giving these new contacts some more background information and impact stories will really strengthen their interest and bond with your cause. So you want to start that series by giving some context to your work. So your donor may, for example, might know that you're working to end hunger, but that doesn't mean that they know where you work or what might set your organization apart. So the number one goal of this welcome series is to inspire supporters and to show them how you can create impact together. And it really doesn't need to be that heavy of a lift either. A welcome series really only needs to be 2 or 3 emails, but it's really about taking the time to get new supporters up to speed to really nurture that relationship and prime them to take action. And when doing so, just make sure to develop a cadence that makes sense and works well with kind of the messaging that you've developed and that really feels right for the level of engagement that you have with your current supporters. So this is really kind of the crux of the matter here, and I think why we're all here today is, thinking about that transition between that, that really big moment of Giving Tuesday and kind of smoothly transitioning then into year-end fundraising. So what we really want to say here is that your missions are extremely important. And we really believe that fundraising goals should be as ambitious as the missions and the programs that nonprofits have. I think something important to talk about here as well is just that not meeting your fundraising goals isn't something that you should shy away from or not talk about. It's really important to be transparent with your supporters and also just to use if you meet your goal or you don't, kind of use that to kind of frame your communication strategy for what's next. So in practical terms, what this really means is that you should have a plan A and a plan B based on the results of your Giving Tuesday moment. So the first, if you meet your goal, shout about it. Talk about the impact of that success. This can be kind of a purely celebratory message about hitting your goals, how exciting that is, and kind of what the next steps are there. But if you don't meet your goal, shout about that too. This can be more celebratory, but also bound in reality where, the work continues and make it more forward-looking. But really what you want to do here is talk about where you are relative to your year-end goal and communicate why you need your donors' help to meet that goal. And again, kind of keeping the time frame in mind as to why it's urgent and why you need their donation now. So really, we see either side of this coin as a huge opportunity to craft your messaging in a very meaningful way to supporters and allow them to kind of understand kind of where you fall within kind of Giving Tuesday, and then look forward to what's next and present them that opportunity to get involved. All right, and now I'm going to kick it over to Dan, and he's going to talk about segmentation.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so on segmenting your file, it's one of my personal favorite subjects. But segmentation, broadly speaking, lets your donors know that you care. The donor segmentation allows you to personalize your follow-ups and improve some important KPIs, including open rates, the relevancy of your messages, and then, of course, the likelihood of a response. And it also makes practical sense to segment your donors based on donation recency. And the other options, though, include the number of donations. So folks that, if they give quite a bit, that's one group you might want to consider. The other groups to consider could be how they were acquired, and also the gift size. And if you have this information, if you have donor capacity information, that might be something else to consider your segmentation for your segmentation strategy. And then a side note, donor personas can be a great way to personalize your content further and try to understand more deeply what resonates with your various audiences. These are a few donor segment treatment ideas. So we recommend having a segmentation and suppression plan in place in advance of your appeal. So these are a few segments that we put together that most organizations can pretty easily put together. So we have active donors, and we think these are some of your best donors. Make sure that you want to acknowledge their support throughout the course of 2018 and what they have made possible. And then I think this is an opportunity to ask them for a second gift, specifically around year-end. Lapsed donors are folks that have not given in more than 12 months. And these are donors you want to renew. Remind them that they have helped previously, remind them of that previous support and that you need them now more than ever. And then here for these folks, feel free to use words like renew and lapsed and pending in your email copy. These kinds of words can trigger a response for donors that say, oh, I do need to renew my commitment, and then likely drive a response. For recent donors, you want to consider serving them an abbreviated appeal. But that's all to say you don't want to fully suppress them from your appeals. This can be a really strong group of donors to make a secondary ask for. So, for example, if you have folks that had given to you during Giving Tuesday, your inclination might be to suppress them for the remainder of your year-end appeal. We might advise you to consider calling out that they made a Giving Tuesday gift and, of course, thanking them for it, and then asking them for a subsequent special year-end gift. You also want to, of course, decide who you actually want to do suppress from your appeals. For example, some folks like to suppress 30-day or 15-day recent. I think you got to figure out what your organization is comfortable doing, and then sticking to a plan throughout the course of your appeal. New donors, these are folks that have joined your cause in this year. I think it's an opportunity at year end to, of course, welcome them to your organization and thanking them for being a part of your mission. But still an opportunity to consider asking them for a second year-end gift. Then for non-donors, these are the prospects on your email file. we recommend considering asking them for a smaller gift than you typically might ask your other donor segments. You might want to tell them that year-end is the best time of year to make a philanthropic gift. And you also might want to point out that it's very easy to make a gift on your donation form. Most organizations have some special touch segments, and these are folks that you want to consider, again, in advance of planning out your messaging strategy and your email calendar. First one we look at is major donors. These are typically higher touch segments that require a more personal touch and more personal appeal. You might want to suppress them from the entire year-end appeal, but you definitely want to check with your major gift team so that they have a messaging plan in place. You might want to add them to select messages throughout the course of the appeal. Monthly donors, we would recommend considering giving them an abbreviated appeal. But when you do serve up certain emails to them throughout the course of December, you want to acknowledge their ongoing monthly commitment and then ask them to make a special one-time year-end here. So the trick with these folks is that just to acknowledge that they do give monthly, and don't just ask for a gift. You want to make sure that, like I said, you want to acknowledge that they give monthly, and then maybe frame your ask as a special one-time ask. For recent donors, and I alluded to this on the slide before, you want to consider giving them an abbreviated appeal, but they can be one of your best segments to make an ask. So do consider messaging them with an ask around year end, but with the caveat, just acknowledge their recent support. Another segment is giving society members. You might want to acknowledge their membership and what they've accomplished as a member of that society. And similarly to the other special touch segments, you want to consider sending them an abbreviated appeal. Direct mail recipients, I would imagine a lot of you all have direct mail programs going. What we typically advise is that you reference your DM notice in the mail. So in your email copy, you can frame it around, you may have seen our letter we sent to you. I want to make sure that you saw this letter we sent. This should be sitting in your mailbox. And then another little one we like to add is a PS apology. So you add a PS apologizing for if your email had crossed paths with the gift that they made in the mail. And what I like about this particular tactic and this treatment is that oftentimes just apologizing as if you received the gift already will remind them that they still need to make that gift and either go back to that direct mail piece and send in their check or just quickly making a gift online through that email. Suppression strategy. So while segmentation is certainly very important, we want to make sure that you all have a suppression strategy that's pretty evergreen. And then it's important to suppress for a few reasons. One, it increases your overall email deliverability, of course, your open rates, and then, of course, your response rates. So a few segments rather to consider for suppression. Folks that are hard bounce or soft bounce, you'll likely want to suppress those. Folks that are unengaged on your file, so typically records that have not opened an email in between 6 and 9 months ago, they're likely just not interested anymore. And you shouldn't be offended, but just do suppress them because it ultimately does impact your overall email deliverability. Folks that recently donated, again, these are folks that you might want to consider suppressing for certain portions of the appeal. And if you are to bring them back into the appeal after, say, suppressing them for 14 days, just to acknowledge that they did give recently and that you're asking them for the second special gift. Folks that are active in your welcome series, so these are people that Sarah had mentioned earlier as far as who would be receiving your welcome series. You don't want to double up sending email appeals while your welcome series is active to this audience. And so we recommend having a dynamic suppression segment in place that suppresses all recipients of your welcome series until they have left the welcome series, until the welcome series is over. And then finally, the special touch segments, as we mentioned earlier, you want to consider who are those high touch segments and make sure that you do have a plan in place, usually in calendar form of when you want to exactly suppress your major donors and your monthly donors, for example.
All right, thanks, Dan. So now we're going to jump into kind of how to make your campaign a little bit more manageable. We know there's a lot that goes into planning Giving Tuesday campaigns, but you don't have to totally reinvent the wheel here as you transition into year end. So the first one, pretty straightforward, is to plan ahead. But this is really as it relates to kind of your content and your overall communication strategy. So really take the time to actually map out your content strategy before you start building. So the look and feel of your campaign and of all of your campaign assets should make sure to be consistent across channels. And really what's important here is to just make note of which of those content pieces will actually need updating after Giving Tuesday to save yourself some time. So whether that's, updating your campaign landing page with a new goal, or whether you hit your goal or you did not, or kind of reframing some of your fundraising emails based on what you see out of Giving Tuesday. But really it's about just making sure that you have all of the assets in place and that you make those updates as needed after Giving Tuesday. So think about your donor welcome series, any of the appeals that you've crafted, any social graphics, for example, and think about too framing your impact stories in a way that really demonstrates your organization's values. And think too about collecting maybe some testimonials from your constituents, but thinking about your content as a larger piece of your campaign, I think really helps for you to plan ahead and be ready to make that transition and to make it quickly.
Yes, on the next slide, we like to think sort of less is more. So we like to consider the thematic approach of the overall appeal into a smaller, more manageable mini appeals, if you will. But all this to say is that you still want to focus on the donor across all of those messages, be present, active, and direct. And mostly, you really want to help donors understand why their donation matters and why it matters right now. So be deliberate with your call to action and make sure you put that front and center. And so when we get into managing your appeal, we like to consider managing the appeals in reverse time order. So I like to start with the last week of the year. So the last week of the year, this is what we call your institutional portion of your appeal. So this is high volume and typically transactional. You want to use personalization. You want to mention your amount from goal. You might want to reference that more than once throughout that course of that week. You want to leverage the tax deadline, really bring that up and make sure you point that out. And then leverage matching gifts if you at all possible. If you have matching gifts, there's no amount too small that can be leveraged. And we find that they are incredibly impactful in driving revenue during that last week of the year. Then continuing in reverse time order is the holiday week. So this is what we consider your last opportunity for stewardship and cultivation. So consider serving up a holiday card or a thank you note. This is also an opportunity to serve up a different kind of ask, like maybe a gift in honor of someone or perhaps a symbolic gift or a mini appeal. Then prior to the giving week, for the holiday week, this is our mid-month point of the appeal. So typically a lull in the fundraising. So this is like between the institutional portion at the end of the month and after the Giving Tuesday moment. So here, to drive a sense of urgency, you might want to try and do a 24-hour, 48-hour mid-month appeal. So leveraging a deadline and also leveraging match funds during this moment, that can be incredibly helpful. So typically having a smaller goal, a tighter timeline, and some measure of match funds to help drive a sense of urgency during the middle of the month. And then as we talked a little bit about earlier, the early part of December is that first post-Giving Tuesday cultivation and stewardship opportunity. So here, as we already kind of mentioned, you want to consider talking about the success or the failure of your Giving Tuesday campaign. And if it's a success, that's fantastic. And if it's not a success and you fell short, that's also fantastic. There's an opportunity to make an ask. It's also a good moment to do a year in review. That sets people up for the sort of the appeal ahead, as well as sort of reminds folks of the impact that your organization has had with your donor support. Then next, I think we want to go into some tips, tricks, and tactics. So over to Sarah.
Great. So yeah, we've talked a lot about kind of segmentation and different ways to treat your donors and to interact with them. But we wanted to dive a little bit deeper just into some messaging strategies. So it's really a simple way of looking at things in terms of how you kind of craft this appeal, really into three parts. So thinking about the problem, so identifying that problem, identifying the solution or how your organization is working towards that solution, and then crafting that ask. So making the use case for how donors can get involved and how they can get involved now. So kind of with that framework in mind, we have a few, another few tips. Basically, the first one, thinking about who that message is actually coming from. So make sure to choose your best spokespeople. So this could be, leaders at your organization. It could be other donors, volunteers, or individuals who are impacted by your organization's work. So really think about the message that you're sending, the content that's in it, and perhaps the impact that's being communicated through that message. And think about who that best spokesperson would be to actually send that message. Secondly, you want to make sure to communicate impact. So communicate the impact that your organization has or the impact that a donation will have, but also to really create that sense of urgency as to why it's important to give now. And then as it relates to storytelling, we like to focus a bit more on individual impact rather than leaning too heavily on collective stats. So using statistics alone isn't necessarily a good route, but if you want to use these impact stats, it's good to bring them in back into more of an individual narrative and wrap up the statistics in a way that's more human and more relatable to the supporter. Because really, again, if we think about being donor-centric, we want to make sure that the message that we're sending is more relatable, or they're able to really understand what the problem, the solution, and the ask is. So really, number 4 here really speaks to kind of the beauty of digital and why digital fundraising is very important. Is to be able to listen to kind of the past data on what motivates your supporters. So don't hesitate to do maybe a mini audit on your emails. So how have past emails and messaging performed as it relates to your different supporter segments, and don't be afraid to make some tweaks kind of based on what that data tells you. And lastly, be authentic. So supporters really want those one-on-one conversations, and they want to feel like they're engaging with you on a more individual level. And of course, now we have, there are a lot of tools out there that allow us to do that. So make sure to take advantage of that personalization, but then also make sure that your messaging from those spokespeople comes back to the supporter in a more authentic way. So this is an example of an email that I really love that actually landed in my inbox earlier this week. It's an email from the new president of Planned Parenthood, and I think it's a really great example of email messaging that's really conversational and personal, and really connects the reader to right away. So, right off the bat, she starts out with a personal narrative about her sister and her mother, and as that kind of relates back to the mission of Planned Parenthood, and it really connects the reader and the writer back to this mission. It also really puts the donor, kind of frames the donor as the hero. So kind of going back to that methodology of community-centric fundraising. It's thanking the donor, and I love this quote, Planned Parenthood's strength comes from those who stand with us. So it's really communicating that they're only as strong as the reader, which really, it makes the reader feel very empowered. And I think what's really interesting too, and really important about this message specifically, is that the appeal is actually buried a lot further down in the body of this email. I think a lot of organizations believe that they should steer clear of these longer narratives, but that's not always true. So this is this narrative really flows well, and then the appeal is kind of it comes after the reader feels celebrated and feels more bought in and kind of excited based on this email. So it's something to test. Obviously, kind of different tactics work well for different organizations, but just something to keep in mind that sometimes having the appeal that ask be a bit later on can actually work well in kind of setting up that narrative and your overall storytelling to the supporter. All right, kick it over to Dan.
Yeah, so just wanted to run through a few tactics that we actually like in example. So this is one from American Red Cross, and we talked a little bit earlier about a year in review email. This is a stewardship cultivation type of message. So this is an opportunity to sort of, again, shout about all the accomplishments that you have made in that year, and all bringing it back to that donor-centric, community-centric approach. So you'll notice here, they use language like the incredible work that we accomplished together in 2017, and they go through some concrete examples of what was actually done and for what reason. So it sort of flips it in the sense that like it provides a solution and then the problem afterward, which I think is nice too. And again, it's all about thanking the donors and celebrating what they have accomplished together. And of course, it has a really nice, compelling image. It's got the staff worker with the American Red Cross jacket on, hugging someone that has been helped. It's just a really nice message in that respect. On the next slide, this is a couple examples of a tactic that I like to use in my old job at World Food Program. This is a slide of rotating gifts. These are to help drive urgency around either your institutional portion of your appeal towards the later part. So imagine on the 30th or the 31st. But similarly, it can be used in that mid-month, 24-hour, 48-hour flash match appeal. And so if you have someone on your staff, typically someone in your communications department that knows their way around making some gifts, there might be a time to lean on them and see if they can create something similar for you for your email. On the next slide, again, talking about leveraging a match. So this is an example that I used previously about leveraging a match. So these leveraging match funds can be incredibly important if you have them at your disposal. The trick to using them is to try and be as strategic as possible. So for example, you might know that some of your donors on your file are going to give no matter what you ask them. They might be the best people in the world, but maybe for some of your more deeply lapsed people or your non-donors, you might want to serve up a targeted match for those folks only. And this helps in a couple of respects. One, it helps to get those older donors or those non-donors back onto your active file. And two, it helps you be strategic with your limited match funding. So I like to use that. And just as another point to make about Giving Tuesday, PayPal will be matching $7 million in nonprofit donations through the Facebook fundraising. So if you want to bake your Facebook fundraising into your Giving Tuesday plans, that's also a great idea because you'll be able to leverage a match without having to come up with a match funding on your own. On the next slide, also from one of my old jobs at the Smithsonian, this is just a nice holiday card. It was an interesting little graphic that points to a specific installation that they had done. I think it was at the Hirshhorn. It's just a simple season's greetings from the Smithsonian with a nice, your friends at the Smithsonian wish you a infinite joy this holiday season. Then on the following slide, there's an example from the Human Rights Campaign. This landed in my inbox, I think, last year, but this is an example. It's just a really nice, warm, happy holidays from the Human Rights Campaign. What's good about their group is that they have pretty strong brand recognition. So I love the way they leverage putting the branded colors on the scarves and the hats and the earmuffs of the snowmen. So pretty cute use of their brand and logos there.
Yeah, and another tactic relates to symbolic gifts. So I love this example just because I really love this organization. So Apropos actually trains rats to save lives. So they sniff out landmines and help actually with clearing landmines in previously war-torn countries. And they also do sniffing for tuberculosis and TB testing. So with this organization, they actually have a digital adoption program, which basically, it's turning a donation into something more for a donor. So this can work for organizations that don't necessarily have a physical gift or e-commerce operation, but it can be as simple as kind of setting up a digital gift giving program complete with a thank you email that really communicates that impact. But with this case, you're actually adopting a hero rat, and you can do that, for yourself or on behalf of someone else. So if you give the gift of a hero rat adoption, essentially, the person that you're giving this gift to will receive updates on kind of the work that these rats are doing, this life-saving work, and kind of keep them invested beyond that donation. So, it really provides value to the donor while also very clearly communicating what the impact of that donation might be.
And then on the next slide, we have an example from the International Rescue Committee. They also do symbolic gifts. What I love the way they do fundraising broadly, but I really like how they break up their year-end appeal with this symbolic giving program. So they have a whole website, a catalog on their website that you can actually go and shop for, or shop on rather. But like from a strategic standpoint, I love the fact that they have their traditional, year-end appeal that subsequently follows their gift giving campaign around the holiday moment. So this is what we alluded to earlier, in a way that you can break up your year-end appeal into sort of mini appeals. And then on the next slide is a similar example from the Lincoln Park Zoo, where I used to frequent as a young child. But again, same idea here, where you can give these symbolic gifts to benefit specific animals in the zoo. So just a similar approach to the previously mentioned the symbolic giving campaign. And there's a few different ways to use it. What I like about this one is that the gift amounts are very low. So this can help with some sort of the new donor acquisition, or perhaps some of your re-engagement strategies for your lapsed file. And then this last example is a good example here of a gift in honor of someone. So this comes to us from the Red Cross, and I think this is just another example and another idea by which to break up that year-end appeal. So this holiday moment is an opportunity to just sort of change the way you might want to message folks around in December to give a gift in honor of someone. What I like here is that the gifts they give are tangible. So it has those price points, as we call them, and you can really understand what the gift is going to be going towards and what the value will be. Then on the next slide, this is just a point to be strategic with the last week of the year. So these are a couple of examples from tactics that are within email, but you want to reserve that last week of the year to leverage the 12/31 tax deadline. You want to leverage a public-facing fundraising goal, and if you have a match offer, do leverage it. And in this moment, you'll notice probably lots of other organizations doing similar things. So you will have to compete with the noise, so to speak, and share a wallet of your donor file. On the next slide is another tactic that we really love. It's our spreadsheet tactic. It's pretty easy to execute, which is one of the reasons that I really love it. But the second reason is that it's actually really useful and drives a lot of transaction. So it's transparent, it's transactional, it has an ultra clear goal. It's a similar approach can be used with hitting a number of donor goal. For example, we need 500 new donors by the end of this week in order to do X, Y, or Z. But again, what I like about this one is it's very easy to execute. You just need to take a screen grab of the spreadsheet and then pop it into your email. Similar to you might see these, but similar to the rotating gift, but a rotating gift with a thermometer. I think you've probably seen these. They might seem tired at this point, but I would argue that they're being used because they still work. So consider asking your staff that knows their way around making gifts to help you create a thermometer with an amount to go. And then this next one is a donor count thermometer. So same idea as a regular thermometer, but in this instance, instead of leveraging the number of or the dollar amount goal that you might have, it leverages the donor number goal that you might have. So this might be good for organizations that might be leery of sort of putting out there a public-facing goal. This might be an easier way to still leverage a goal that's not tied directly to revenue. And then our last slide before we get into questions is this example from the Sierra Club. What I like about it is actually it's not very pretty to look at, but it is certainly effective. They have a triple match. They are leveraging highlighted copy, which I actually really like. And they have that call out box right at the top too. So there's lots going on in this email. It might not seem very pretty, but it does drive response. They use these quite a bit. And I think it's mostly to do with the compelling language. And it feels kind of homespun, which also might be a way to think about how you might craft your emails. They don't have to always look pretty. They just have to be effective. And so I think that's just a good example rather from the Sierra Club on how that might come together for you in your organization. And so on that note, I think we can pause for questions or spend the rest of the 15 minutes or so that we have on the line to answer any questions or hear other ideas from the group.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Dan, and thank you, Sarah. We do have a couple questions that have come through, so I'll read those in just a second. I do want to just say here, because we have a mix of attendees. We have some people that are already Salsa clients, and then we might have some ones on here that are looking for a program. And I do just want to say that the email features, particularly the segmentation, the personalization of emails that you guys had spoken about and showed us some screens on, that is all native functionality in Salsa Engage. So if you're a current client and you saw those and you're wondering, oh, how do I do those things in my emails, that's all part of Salsa Engage. So I would suggest either if you don't know how to do that, look at our help documentation, or definitely send an email in or call into our support line so they can walk you through how to use these really good tactics to make your emails more targeted, but then also more personalized, like you guys spoke. And then just some other things too. This is a new thing that we actually just recently introduced in terms of the payment end of things is you can actually have your donors use their PayPal account to make their donation. So you can integrate that into your donation page. They can pay via credit card or they can pay via their PayPal account. And then also on the matching side of things, we do partner with Double the Donation. So that's Double the Donation. If you don't have a matching gift program, we would suggest looking at theirs because we do have a few clients that do use Double the Donation. So with that, we do have some questions that have come through. So one here from Diana. Maybe, Dan, you can speak to this. She's asking, do the goal-driven campaigns work when the amount they want to raise is pretty low, something like less than $10,000? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think I would always err on the side of having a goal as opposed to having no goal, no matter what size it is. And I think a $10,000 goal, depending on how you position it, and depending on how much you otherwise raise, could work. For example, if you raise a lot of money and $10,000 does not seem like a lot, perhaps that's a good goal to raise or a good goal to have for that mid-month 24-hour, 48-hour campaign. Alternatively, if you feel like it's too low, one way to reference a goal is not necessarily even having to mention the goal, but having to reference your amount from the goal. So, for example, if you raise $5,000 and you're at a $10,000 goal, I might position that as we only have $5,000 to go. Help us, cross the finish line or help us reach that milestone.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Maybe even too, Dan, like you said, your other option is to do it by the donor count. They could have that as a goal if the number, the volume amount isn't something you want to share. Okay, that is good. Susan here, yes, the slides will be available. We will send those to you in the follow-up email that you guys will receive later today or at the very latest tomorrow, depending on how fast this recording loads up into GoToMeeting for us. Another question here from Diana is, and then this kind of goes to something we were discussing earlier at the beginning of the webinar, what our recommendation is for recurring donors. You know, should they keep them out of the appeals, keep them in the appeals? And I think, Dan, you had mentioned it's best to suppress them through some of those emails so that they're not totally bombarded, right?
Yeah, I would think I wouldn't shy. I think a lot of organizations kind of shy away from messaging their monthly donors because it's like, okay, what if I remind them that they're a monthly donor, then they cancel? I think that's certainly a fear, a legitimate fear to have, but I would argue that monthly donors realize they're monthly donors and they're happy to be a monthly donor. I think that, to me, and as someone who donates monthly to a few different organizations, I'm proud to be a monthly donor. And if they frame and ask in such a way that acknowledges that monthly commitment, and then ask for a special one-time gift. I think the trick with monthly donors when you're asking for a year-end gift is simply to acknowledge that monthly gift, and of course, as Rachel said, don't necessarily bombard them. But when you do email them, and do email them, just acknowledge that they are making a monthly gift.
Okay, cool. So those are all the questions that have come through so far. I think we can hang out here for a few more minutes in case a few other questions come through. But I do want to thank everyone again for all of your time. I know we're heading into a very busy season, so we do appreciate you guys taking the last 50 minutes to be with us. As you can see, Sarah just changed the screen to the contact information there. So feel free if you guys have any questions. There's Dan's contact information, and then also if you're not an existing client, we'd love for you guys to see what we have going on here. We do these webinars pretty frequently. We have another one coming up at the end of this week on Friday, and so we kind of continually do these throughout the month. All right, well, it doesn't look like any other questions are coming through. Actually, let's see. We did get one. Perfect. Okay, so this one's from Karen. Can you reiterate the best method to address sending direct mail and a year-end email blast? Reiterate what the best method is to address sending direct mail and a year-end email blast. I'm not sure which one of you want to take that one.
I can take that. So, so with direct mail, it's obviously direct mail is tricky, right? Because you have to send it to the mailing house, and depending on your postage, it might land at a time that you're not sure of. So the way I like to approach it is to make sure once you should be able to in advance segment who your direct mail recipients will be. And so that's one way to make sure that, okay, at least I know who in my email file that I'll be sending direct mail notices to. And then the second one, so that you have that piece, the segmentation piece. And then you have a few different routes. I think there's I've been a part of campaigns where we do an integrated appeal. So the way we do it was with what we call email kickers and chasers. And so what you might want to do is send out an email to your direct mail file first in advance of when you think that direct mail piece will land, and say something to the effect of, keep an eye out on your mailbox. I want to make sure that you saw this note about X, and then your email then can echo whatever your direct mail piece is about. And then similarly, you can send a chaser, which is to say, after when your direct mail piece has landed, you could send an email to the folks that it was sent to and say, did you see my note in the mail? I want to make sure that you were able to read about, and then again, echo the points in your direct mail notice. Another thing to consider for that is, as far as your ask strings go, this might be a little bit difficult to execute, but like making sure that you're asking for the same amounts in your direct mail as you are in your email for those selects. But then the best way to do this without upsetting people is to add that PS. And typically I would add a PS that says, please excuse this email as a cross paths with your donation, and thank you so much for your donation. And then also add a hyperlink that says, please, if you haven't made your donation, please click here to do so. So that kind of covers all your bases as far as, you know, over messaging people or coming off as, you know, not thoughtful about the fact that you're sending people direct mail notices and email at the same time. And then when you add that PS, and I've added PSs to all of the subsequent email appeals and up to like 20 appeals. And so long as you continue to have that PS. The one thing to consider though is what you can try and do is make sure that you import folks into people that have given to your direct mail and that you know have given to your direct mail and you're able to import them as a suppression segment. Do that, because this way you can at least, you know, suppress the people that you know for a fact have given because their gift came in through the mail. So I think and this is a little bit more cumbersome because it's not a dynamic, just automatic query that'll grab folks and automatically suppress them if they had given online. So likely is a manual import from your database where you need to push those direct mail response donors into your ECRM and then subsequently suppress them from the appeal. So there is a few ways to, I think, approach the integrated campaigns, but broadly speaking, in the email side of it, is to simply acknowledge it that you are sending them direct mail in some way, and then continuously acknowledging that in the subsequent email appeals.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that explanation. I think that's definitely a good thing to bring up too, is just acknowledge that, you know, you're doing all these things with your supporters so that they sort of feel like, you know, you recognize that you're sending them multiple communications. I do like that approach. And one of the things too with Salsa Engage that you had mentioned is if you have it paired with either our CRM or another CRM, you can do the dynamic groups and set the criteria to be, you know, relative to the last 14 days. If they've given, put them in this suppression group and include that in an email blast that you're sending, or you would exclude them rather from that email blast that you were doing.
Yeah, and I think the one point I would add too is, like, you know, your donors are smart. They understand that it's not exactly easy to coordinate all that stuff, but it just adds that extra measure of sophistication so long as you're acknowledging it.
All right, so we'll wait for any other questions to roll in kind of on these last few minutes. I'll just wish everyone the best of luck for Giving Tuesday. I know everyone's preparing for that, and then hopefully the end of the year is also successful for everyone. If you are a current client of Salsa's, if you need any assistance, our help desk is here Monday through Friday, and we're here between the hours of 8 a.m. Eastern Time Zone and 8 p.m. Eastern Time Zone via phone and chat. Or I'm sorry, not chat, phone and email. So you guys can contact us if you have any questions your way.
Yeah, and on our end as well, too, of course, if there are any questions that come up with any of the content that we did cover today with this webinar, I know that we went through a lot in our allotted time, but I hope you all found it valuable. But yeah, feel free to reach out to us, whether it's on social media. We also do have contact forms on our website, or Dan's information here is also readily available. So yeah, feel free to get in touch with us, and we'd love to start a conversation.
All right, sounds good. Well, we haven't gotten any questions, so we'll give everyone the last few minutes of this webinar back in their day. Thanks again for everyone, and we hope you'll join us again soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rachel.